The little puppy had been running for so long that his tiny paws were bleeding, but he didn't stop, not even for a second. Rain hammered the empty street, water soaking his fur, trembling through his bones. He didn't care. He couldn't care. Because he wasn't running for himself. He was running for someone who couldn't run anymore. Someone who needed help. Someone only he could save. And when a police cruiser finally drove past, its headlights cutting through the storm, the puppy did the only thing he could think of. He chased it. He chased it like his life, and the lives of the ones he loved depended on it. What happened next changed a cop forever and brought him to tears. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe to Loyal Protector Stories. Here we share real emotional stories of courage, loyalty, and the incredible bond between humans and animals. Stories that remind us the world still has good in it. Stories just like this one. So hit subscribe, because what this little puppy does next will stay with you long after the video ends. The rain had been falling since before sunrise, soft at first, then steadily building into a gray, miserable curtain that blurred the edges of the quiet neighborhood. Officer Daniel Brooks let out a long breath as his patrol car crept down the slick road, windshield wipers thumping to a tired rhythm. Another long night shift almost behind him. Another stretch of silence. He rubbed his eyes, wishing for a hot shower and a bed that didn't feel like it belonged to someone twice his size, but the universe seemed determined to keep him awake a little longer. Just as he rolled past the intersection at Maple and 9th, he saw movement in the corner of his vision. Small, low to the ground, running fast. At first he thought it was a raccoon or maybe a stray cat darting across the street. Then he saw the tail, then the ears. A puppy. A tiny, soaking wet puppy sprinting directly toward the back of his police cruiser. Daniel blinked. What on earth? He slowed down, then eased the car to a stop. The puppy didn't hesitate. It bolted straight toward the trunk, skidding slightly on the wet asphalt, almost slipping, but never stopping. Daniel stared into the rearview mirror as the little creature reached the bumper and jumped. Actually jumped, trying to get his attention. "What are you doing out here, little guy?" he murmured, opening the door. The moment Daniel stepped out, the puppy let out a frantic bark, high-pitched, urgent, trembling. It wasn't angry. It wasn't playful. It was desperate. Daniel walked carefully toward him, palm open, voice soft. "Hey, hey! Easy. You lost?" The puppy whimpered, then ran toward him, tiny paws splashing in shallow puddles. As soon as he reached Daniel's boots, the puppy tugged at the bottom of his uniform pants, not biting, not attacking, tugging, pleading. Daniel's heart squeezed. He knelt down, ignoring the rain soaking into his uniform, and gently scratched behind the puppy's ears. "Where's your family, little guy?" The puppy backed up 2 steps, barked again, then sprinted a few feet down the road, before stopping, turning, and staring at Daniel with wide, anxious eyes. He barked again. Daniel froze. "You want me to follow you?" It wasn't even a question. The puppy's body language was clear as day. Tail low, posture shaking, eyes full of something dangerously close to fear. Daniel stood up, zipped his jacket, and nodded slowly. "All right, lead the way." The puppy took off instantly. Daniel followed close behind. The pup led him out of the quiet neighborhood, across a stretch of road Daniel normally wouldn't even bother patrolling this early, then toward an old construction site that had been abandoned for months. Rusted fencing sagged around the perimeter. A half-finished foundation sat filled with muddy water. Warning signs were nailed crookedly to posts, peeling with age. The puppy squeezed through a gap in the fence, crying anxiously. Daniel hesitated. This wasn't the kind of place you wandered into without caution, especially alone. But something in the puppy's desperation punched straight through his instinct to turn back. He pulled out his flashlight and stepped through the fence. The puppy ran ahead, stopping every few seconds to make sure Daniel was following. The rain softened, tapering into a misty drizzle that hovered over the cracked cement and scattered debris. Daniel's boots splashed through puddles as he followed the little creature deeper into the site. The puppy stopped abruptly at a pile of warped wooden boards leaning over a shallow depression in the ground. Then he barked, frantic, sharp, terrified. Daniel rushed forward. "What is it? What's wrong?" He lifted the first board, then another. Then he froze. His breath left him in a violent exhale he didn't even realize he'd been holding. 3 small shapes huddled beneath the makeshift shelter. Puppies. 2 of them so still he feared the worst. The third, the smallest, weakly lifted its head before collapsing again. And beside them, the breath left Daniel's lungs. A mother dog. Her body curled protectively around them even in death. Daniel swallowed hard, the weight of the moment crashing into him with brutal force. The rain, the cold, the quiet misery of the morning, everything intensified. The world suddenly felt heavier, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. "Oh, no," he whispered. The little hero puppy, the one who had led him here, crawled beside the lifeless mother and nudged her face with his tiny nose. He cried, a small, broken whimper that sliced straight through Daniel's chest. The puppy then nudged the weakest of the litter, trying to push life into it, trying to wake them, trying to save them. Daniel's eyes burned. "You brought me here for them," he whispered. The puppy looked up at him, wet, shaking, terrified, but determined, as if saying, "Help them, please." Daniel's throat tightened. He reached into the pit, gently lifting the fragile bodies into his arms. They felt cold, too cold. He wrapped them in his jacket, holding them close to his chest for warmth. The hero puppy danced nervously around him, crying with every movement as Daniel stood up. "You're a brave little guy," he whispered. "You held on. You didn't give up on them." The puppy pressed against his leg, whining softly as if urging him to move faster. Daniel moved. He carried the bundle of weak, shaking puppies out of the pit, through the broken fence, back toward his patrol car. The hero puppy followed every step. When Daniel opened the passenger door, the little one jumped inside without hesitation. "You're not leaving their side, are you?" Daniel murmured. The puppy let out a soft cry and placed one tiny paw on Daniel's arm. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "I've got you. I've got all of you." He turned the heater on full blast, cradling the fragile pups, rubbing their heads gently, whispering words meant to keep them awake, keep them breathing. "Hang in there. Hang in there." One of them whimpered weakly. Another shivered in his hands. "Stay with me," he breathed. "We're gonna get you help." His voice cracked. He didn't care. The police station was unusually quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that felt out of place in a building usually humming with noise, paperwork, coffee pots, and officers trading stories. But when Officer Daniel Brooks pushed open the door with a bundle of shivering puppies inside his jacket, every head lifted. "Brooks? What? Whoa, what happened?" Officer Martinez asked, stepping forward instantly, eyes widening as she spotted the tiny paws peeking from between his arms. Daniel didn't stop walking. He headed straight for the small veterinary office tucked near the back of the station, the one used mainly for canine unit checkups. "Emergency," he said, voice cracking. "They're freezing. Malnourished, dehydrated. They won't last long." The door swung open the moment he knocked. Dr. Melanie King, the station's on-call vet, gasped when she saw the tiny bodies wrapped inside his jacket. "Put them here," she said, motioning to a heated table as she rushed to prepare fluids, blankets, and warming pads. As soon as Daniel laid the puppies down, Melanie's face softened, then shifted to focused urgency. "These little ones have been without their mother for at least a day," she murmured. Then she stopped. "Where's the mother?" Daniel swallowed and shook his head. Melanie didn't ask more. She didn't need to. The smallest puppy let out a weak whine, barely lifting its head. The second one didn't even open its eyes. The third, slightly bigger, twitched as Melanie checked its pulse. But the hero puppy, he refused to leave Daniel's side. He kept trying to climb onto the table, crying loudly every time one of the weaker pups whimpered. "He's attached to them," Melanie said softly. "Probably tried to keep them warm. He's exhausted, but he's okay." She looked up at Daniel. He did everything he could. Daniel knelt down and placed a hand gently on the hero puppy's back. The little dog pressed into him, tail tucked low, eyes fixed on the siblings the vet was treating. "You really are something special," Daniel whispered. "Smartest little guy I've ever seen." Melanie worked for several minutes, inserting tiny IV needles, wrapping the pups in warm blankets, rubbing their small chests, whispering to them softly. The room grew quiet except for the faint hum of the heater and the trembling breaths of the puppies fighting to stay alive. Daniel sat on the floor beside the table, legs crossed, the hero puppy curled up against him. Rainwater dripped slowly from his uniform onto the tiles. "I don't understand how you found them," Martinez said, leaning against the doorframe. "You weren't even supposed to be in that neighborhood this morning." Daniel gave a tired half-smile. "He found me, chased the cruiser for 3 blocks. Martinez blinked. "Seriously?" "He wouldn't stop, wouldn't give up." Daniel rubbed the puppy's ear gently. He knew exactly what he was doing. Melanie glanced over her shoulder. "Sometimes animals surprise us. They feel things, sense things, sometimes better than we can." Time passed in slow, heavy minutes. Melanie adjusted the IV for the smallest pup. Its paws twitched. Its chest rose and fell in weak but steady breaths. Then, for the first time, it made a soft noise. Barely a sound, but enough to draw Daniel's breath. "There you go," Melanie whispered. "Stay with me." The hero puppy began to whine, legs shaking. Daniel bent down and lifted him onto his lap. The small body pressed into him like he was trying to absorb warmth from every inch of him. "You're scared for them, aren't you?" Daniel murmured. The puppy looked up at him with eyes too expressive for something his size. Daniel felt something inside him break again. He had no reason to care so deeply so quickly. But something about the way the puppy had chased him down, the way he had refused to abandon his siblings, the pure loyalty in such a tiny creature, hit him harder than anything he'd seen in years on the job. He looked at the table again. "Are they going to make it?" Melanie took a slow breath. "The 2 in the middle. Maybe. The smallest one." She hesitated. "We'll do everything we can." Daniel nodded, jaw tightening. He didn't trust himself to speak. He leaned his head back against the wall, feeling the exhaustion of the night shift sink into his bones. But he didn't close his eyes. He stayed awake, watching every tiny movement on the table, every breath the puppies took. Hours passed. Officers came and went, whispering quietly, leaving cups of coffee beside Daniel, offering towels and blankets. But he stayed exactly where he was, the hero puppy sleeping fitfully across his lap. Sometime in the early afternoon, Melanie approached him with a small smile. "They're warming up, hydration levels improving, heart rates stabilizing." She wiped her forehead with her sleeve. "It's not over, but they're fighters." Daniel released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The hero puppy lifted his head as if understanding every word. "You hear that, buddy?" Daniel whispered. "They're still with us." The puppy licked Daniel's chin, then stretched its tiny body and laid its head back down, comforted. Melanie pointed gently. "He's completely bonded to you, you know." Daniel looked down at the puppy curled in his lap, thinking about the moment it had stood in front of his patrol car in the rain, crying for help. thinking about the way it led him to the broken wooden shelter, thinking about the mother dog who died trying to protect her babies. "Maybe I'm bonded to him," Daniel replied softly. Martinez chuckled from the doorway. "You're done. You've been adopted." Daniel didn't argue. He couldn't. Because it was true. When the puppies were stable enough, Melanie moved them into small, warmed nests lined with clean towels. The hero puppy refused to leave Daniel, so Melanie allowed him to stay on a blanket beside Daniel's leg. Every time one of the pups whimpered in their sleep, he lifted his head anxiously. Daniel gently stroked his fur. "You've been through a lot, haven't you? Brave little guy." By late afternoon, the rain outside turned into a cold drizzle that tapped softly against the station windows. The day shift officers clocked out. Fresh coffee brewed in the break room. The world outside moved on. But in the vet room, time stood still. Daniel didn't go home. He didn't even think about it. The chair under him felt like concrete. His clothes were stiff and cold. But none of it mattered. What mattered were the 3 fragile lives breathing inside those blankets, and the tiny dog pressed against him, trusting him completely. Near sunset, one of the small puppies opened its eyes, just a little, just enough to blink weakly at Daniel. He felt his chest tighten. "There you are," Melanie smiled. "That's a very good sign." The hero puppy wagged his tail once, then pressed his nose against the towel holding his sibling. "You saved them," Daniel whispered. "You really saved them." Sleep finally caught up with him in tiny waves, his head dipping forward, then snapping back up, but he refused to let himself rest. Every time the puppies moved, every time Melanie adjusted their blankets, every time the hero pup whimpered, Daniel was back at full attention. It was nearly midnight when Melanie finally spoke again. "They're stable. All 3 of them." She smiled softly. "They're going to make it." Daniel closed his eyes, letting the relief wash over him. When he opened them again, the little hero puppy was staring at him, tail thumping weakly against the blanket. "Yeah," Daniel whispered. "You did it." He pressed his forehead gently against the puppy's. It nuzzled him back, tiny nose cold but determined. Melanie cleared her throat gently. "You know, they'll need foster care for a few weeks." Daniel didn't even think. "I'll take them." Melanie raised her brows. "All 3?" Daniel looked at the hero puppy, at his tired little face, at the way he shook but still tried to look brave. "Yes," he said quietly. "All 3. Martinez poked her head in, smirking. "Knew it. You're done for, Brooks." Daniel didn't disagree. When he finally gathered the puppies, wrapped carefully in soft blankets, and lifted the hero pup into his arms, something shifted inside him, a feeling he hadn't had in years. Purpose, connection, hope. He walked out of the station slowly, rain misting the air, streetlights glowing faintly through the haze. The hero puppy looked up at him the whole way, tiny face full of trust, as if knowing exactly where he belonged now. Daniel opened the backseat door and placed the puppy inside a little nest of blankets. The pup circled twice, then curled up, tail wrapped around his tiny body, eyes half closed but peaceful. Daniel's hand lingered on him. "You're safe now," he whispered. "All of you are." For the first time that day, he allowed himself a real breath, slow, deep, steady. But he didn't know that the hardest moment, the most emotional revelation of all, was still waiting for him. Because once he got them home, and once the house fell quiet, he would discover why the puppy had chased him that morning. And that truth would bring him to tears. He drove. He didn't remember the roads, only the sound of the puppy's breathing, the trembling hero puppy curled beside his lap, eyes never leaving the siblings he had fought so desperately to save. Officer Daniel Brooks had rescued a lot of people in his career, but this felt different. This felt personal.